Dr. Park had lived on the orbital research station for 3 years. She studied alien biology. She wrote reports. She kept to herself. In all that time, no one had ever invited her to visit the planet below. They did not like humans. They tolerated them, but only because the Galactic Concord required it. To the humans were too loud, too emotional, too warm. They called humans in their language. It meant noisy children. So when the emergency message came asking for a human doctor, thought someone had made a mistake. She read the message 3 times. A remote settlement called needed medical help. Their cubs were dying from a strange sickness. Medicine had failed. They were asking for a human. Packed her medical supplies and boarded the transport before she could change her mind. The flight down to the planet took 4 hours. Spent most of it looking out the window at the frozen world below. Mountains covered in ice stretched in every direction. Rivers of white snow cut through valleys so deep she could not see the bottom. It was beautiful in a cold and lonely way. The transport landed in a valley between 2 massive peaks. The settlement was small. Stone buildings sat in neat rows along a frozen stream. About 200 lived here, and every single one of them came out to watch her arrive. Had seen before, but only on screens and in photographs. Seeing them in person was different. They stood almost 3 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in thick silver fur that moved and shifted like water when they walked. They had 4 arms, each one ending in hands with sharp black claws. Their faces were long and narrow, almost wolf-like, with large dark eyes that reflected light like polished stone. None of them spoke, they just watched. An old female approached. Her silver fur had faded to white with age, and she moved slowly, carefully. But her eyes were sharp and clear. "I am Elder N," she said. Her voice was deep and rough. "You are the human doctor." "Yes, I am Dr. Park." The elder said nothing else. She simply turned and walked toward one of the larger stone buildings, followed. Inside, the building was warmer than expected. Heating elements glowed along the walls, casting orange light across the room. And there, lying on soft padded beds, were the cubs. Stopped breathing for a moment. There were 11 of them, 11 small, each one no bigger than a large dog. Their silver fur was dull and matted with sweat. Their bodies shook with fever. Their breathing was fast and shallow. "The sickness came 2 weeks ago," Elder N said. "Our healers have tried everything. Nothing works. 3 cubs have already died." Walked between the beds, looking at each cub. She pulled out her medical scanner and began taking readings. Temperature, heart rate, blood composition, brain activity. "How did the sickness start?" "We do not know. One cub became ill, then another, then all of them." The elder's voice was flat but could see her fur rippling in strange patterns. She was worried, frightened even. Studied the scanner results. The virus was unlike anything in her database. It attacked the nervous system, causing the fever and trembling she could see. In adult, the immune system could fight it off, but cubs were different. Their immune systems were not fully developed. "I need to work," said. "I need space and quiet. Can you give me that?" The elder stared at her for a long moment. Then she nodded and left the room. Worked through the night. She took blood samples from each cub. She analyzed the virus under her portable microscope. She tested different combinations of antivirals, adjusting the formulas for biology. Bodies processed medicine differently than human bodies. What healed a human might kill a, she had to be careful. The hours passed. Did not eat, she did not sleep. She barely moved from her workstation. Outside, she could hear the adult gathering. They did not enter the building, but she knew they were there, waiting, watching. By morning, she had something, a formula that might work. She loaded it into injection devices and moved to the first cub. The small was barely conscious. Its dark eyes opened slightly as approached. It made a soft sound, almost like a whimper. "It is okay," said softly. "I am going to help you." She gave the injection. The cub flinched, then relaxed, moved to the next one. She treated all 11 cubs before the sun was fully up. Then she sat down in a corner and waited. The next few hours were the longest of her life. She watched the cubs constantly, checking their temperatures, monitoring their breathing. The first cub she had treated showed improvement within 2 hours. Its fever dropped. Its breathing slowed. Its fur began to regain some of its shine. By evening, all 11 cubs were stable. Elder N entered the room just as the sun was setting. She looked at the cubs, then back at the cubs. "They will live." "Yes," said. "The fever is breaking. They need rest and food, but they will recover." The elder was silent for a very long time. Her fur shifted in patterns could not read. "You have done something our healers could not do," said finally. "You have saved the children of." Expected gratitude, a thank you, maybe even a smile if could smile. Instead, the elder handed her a small data pad. "Your transport has been delayed," N said. "Atmospheric storms in the upper regions. It may be several weeks before you can leave." Looked at the data pad. The message was official, stamped with government seals, but something about it felt wrong. "Several weeks. Perhaps longer." The elder turned toward the door. "You will stay in the guest quarters. Food will be provided. Do not wander the settlement alone." Wait called. "What about the cubs? They still need monitoring. I should check on them every few hours." N paused at the door. "You may continue to care for them. It is acceptable." Then she was gone. Looked around the room at the 11 small bodies resting peacefully on their beds. One of them, the smallest cub with unusual black markings on her silver fur, had opened her eyes. She was watching with an expression that seemed almost curious. "Hello," said softly. The cub blinked slowly, but did not look away. Smiled despite her exhaustion. She pulled a blanket from her pack and settled into the corner of the room. She would sleep here tonight, close to her patients. In the morning, she would figure out what to do next. As her eyes closed, she felt something warm press against her side. She looked down to find the small, marked cub had somehow crawled off her bed and made her way across the room. She was now curled against leg, her small body radiating heat. "You should be resting," whispered. The cub made a soft sound and pressed closer. Did not have the heart to move her. She placed one hand gently on the cub's head and let sleep take her. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen valley. Inside, a human doctor slept surrounded by alien children she had just saved. She did not know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. The storms that kept her grounded were not natural, and the cubs she had saved would never let her go. The cubs recovered faster than expected. Within 3 days, they were sitting up and eating. Within a week, they were walking around the medical building, exploring every corner with wide, curious eyes. Cubs were not like human children. They were quiet. They did not run around screaming or laughing. They moved carefully, watching everything with the sharp attention of hunters. Their large, dark eyes tracked every movement. Their ears rotated toward every sound. They communicated mostly through touch. Watched them press against each other, their fur brushing together in patterns she did not understand. They groomed each other constantly, running their claws through each other's fur in ways that seemed to carry meaning. She did not understand them, but she was beginning to find them fascinating. On the 8th day, noticed something strange. The cubs were watching her. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but no. Wherever she went in the medical building, small dark eyes followed. When she turned to look, the cubs would quickly look away, but as soon as she turned back, she could feel their attention on her again. Then they started following her. It began with the smallest cub, the one with the unusual black markings. Her name had learned. She was the runt of her litter, born small and weak. The other cubs did not play with her much. She spent most of her time alone. But she did not spend her time alone anymore. Now she spent it following. Wherever went, followed. When checked on the other cubs, sat nearby and watched. When ate her meals, sat at her feet. When went to her guest quarters at night, followed her to the door and sat outside until morning. Asked the clan healer about it. His name was Diyen, and he was one of the few who spoke to her directly. "You should not encourage her," Diyen said. His fur rippled with disapproval. "She is different. The others do not accept her." "Different how?" "Her markings, her silence. She does not bond properly with the pack." Diyen shook his head slowly. "When she comes of age, she will likely be sent to the outer territories. Alone. It is our way." Looked at the small cub sitting outside the healer's building, patient as stone. "That seems cruel." "It is tradition." Diyen's voice was flat. "You should not form attachments. It will only make things harder for both of you." That night, the temperature dropped lower than it had been since arrived. Her heating unit made strange groaning sounds as it struggled to keep her quarters warm. She wrapped herself in every blanket she had and still shivered. Then she heard scratching at her door. She opened it to find curled on the threshold. The small cub was shaking badly. Her fur was puffed up against the cold, but it was not enough. She was freezing. Knew she should send her back to the cub's den. The rules were clear. Humans and kept separate. She should not interfere with their social structures. She should not form attachments. She picked up the shivering cub and carried her inside. Weighed almost nothing. Her small body fit easily in his arms. The cub made a soft sound of surprise when lifted her, but she did not struggle. Instead, she pressed closer, seeking warmth. Set her down on the bed and covered her with blankets. Within minutes, the shivering stopped. Eyes closed and her breathing became slow and peaceful. Lay down beside her and tried to sleep. She woke in the middle of the night to find that it moved. The small cub was no longer at the foot of the bed. She had crawled up during the night and was now pressed against the side, her head resting on shoulder. One small clawed hand gripped sleeve tightly. Did not move her. She simply closed her eyes and went back to sleep. The next day, everything changed. Returned to her quarters after her evening meal to find cubs everywhere. All 11 of them were gathered outside her door. They sat in a silent group, their dark eyes watching her approach. Was at the front of the group. When she saw, she stood and walked to her side. Then she looked back at the other cubs and made a soft clicking sound. "They want to come in," said. Stared at her. It was the first time she had heard speak. "What?" "They want to come in," repeated. Her voice was soft and high like wind through crystal. "They want to be with you." "Why?" Tilted her head as if the question confused her. "You kept us alive. You are warm, you smell like safety." Looked at the gathered cubs. They watched her with patient expectation. Their fur rippled in patterns she was starting to recognize as hope. Her quarters were small. They were designed for one human, not 12 cubs. There was not enough room for all of them. She opened the door anyway. The cubs filed in silently. They spread out across every surface. Some climbed onto her bed. Others curled up on the floor. A few found spots on her single chair, piling on top of each other until the chair creaked under their weight. Within minutes was surrounded. Everywhere she looked, she saw silver fur and dark watching eyes. The room was warm now, heated by a dozen small bodies. Pressed against her side and made a sound of contentment. Did not sleep much that night. She lay in her bed, covered in cubs, and stared at the ceiling. She thought about what Diyen had said. She thought about attachments. She thought about what would happen when she finally left this place. But mostly, she thought about how strange and wonderful it felt to be surrounded by creatures who trusted her completely. The cubs came back the next night, and the night after that. Within a week, it had become routine. Every evening, 11 small bodies would gather outside her door and wait for her to let them in. Every morning, they would leave before the adults woke and return to their den. No one spoke about it. The adult must have known what was happening, but they said nothing. Even De Yen, who had warned her against forming attachments, kept silent. Started to learn their names. There was, of course, the smallest and quietest. There was Bora, the biggest cub, who always claimed the warmest spot on the bed. There was, who liked to groom's hair while she slept. There was, who brought her small gifts of polished stones and pretty feathers. She learned their personalities, their likes and dislikes, the ways they communicated with each other and with her. She learned that cubs were not so different from human children after all. They were curious. They were playful in their quiet way. They wanted to be loved and protected. And for reasons did not fully understand, they had chosen her. 3 weeks after the sickness, woke to find staring at her in the darkness. "What is wrong?" whispered. His eyes reflected the faint light from the heating unit. "The elder is coming," she said. "Something is happening." Before could ask what she meant, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Elder N standing in the corridor. The old's white fur seemed to glow in the darkness. Her ancient eyes looked past to the cubs arranged across her room. "We need to talk," the elder said. "About them, about you, about what they have done." Felt her heart begin to beat faster. "What do you mean? What have they done?" N's fur rippled in a pattern had never seen before. It took her a moment to recognize it. "Fear. They have made a declaration," the elder said. "A declaration that has not been made in 500 years." She stepped into the room, and the cubs parted around her like water around a stone. "They have named you Tal," N continued, "chosen guardian, protector of their souls." Looked at the cubs surrounding her. 11 pairs of dark eyes looked back. "What does that mean?" "It means," the elder said slowly, "that your life is no longer your own." Stood in the middle of her small room, surrounded by cubs and faced with an elder who looked at her like she had done something terrible. "I do not understand," said. "What is Tal? What does it mean?" Elder N moved deeper into the room. Despite her age, she moved with a grace that reminded of flowing water. The cubs shifted to make space for her, but they did not move away from. If anything, they pressed closer. "Sit," the elder said. "This will take time to explain." Sat on her bed, immediately climbed into her lap. The other cubs arranged themselves around her feet, on her blankets, against her sides. They formed a protective circle with at the center. And watched this with eyes that gave nothing away. "In ancient times," the elder began, "before we joined the stars, they were divided into many clans. We fought constantly. Wars lasted generations. Cubs grew up knowing nothing but blood and death." She paused, her fur rippling with old memories. During those dark times, a practice developed. When a clan was destroyed, when all the adults were killed, sometimes the cubs survived. They would wander the frozen lands, lost and alone. Most died. But sometimes they found someone who would take them in, protect them, raise them as their own. "An adoption?" asked. "No, something stronger," N's dark eyes fixed on. "When cubs choose a guardian, it is not a request. It is not a negotiation. It is a declaration of the soul. The bond cannot be broken. It cannot be transferred. It lasts until death." Felt cold despite the warmth of the cubs around her. "And these cubs have made this declaration about me." "Yes, all 11 of them together." The elder's voice carried a weight that could not identify. "This has never happened before. Cubs fight. They argue. They compete with each other for everything. To have 11 cubs agree on anything is unusual. To have them agree on a Tal declaration is unprecedented. But I did not ask for this. I did not even know this was possible." "That does not matter. The declaration has been made. The bond is formed." N leaned forward slightly. "You are now bound to these cubs, Dr. Park, and they are bound to you." Looked down at who was watching her with those large dark eyes. The small cub's clawed hand still gripped her sleeve. "What does this mean for me, practically speaking?" You cannot leave, N said simply. Not without them, and they cannot leave until they reach maturity. That is 15 years by your counting. 15 years. The words hit like a physical blow. She thought about her life on the research station, her career, her work, the careful, controlled existence she had built for herself among the stars, all of it gone in a single night because 11 small creatures had decided they needed her. What if I refuse? She asked. What if I just leave anyway? The cubs around her made soft sounds of distress. His grip on her sleeve tightened. You cannot refuse. The declaration exists outside of choice. N's fur rippled with something that might have been sympathy. But I do not think you will try to leave. You are human. Your kind has a weakness for those who need you. You cannot abandon something that depends on you. It is in your nature. You make it sound like a flaw. Perhaps it is. Perhaps it is not. The elder rose to her feet. It is certainly inconvenient for everyone involved. She moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back. There will be challenges, she said. Not everyone in the clan accepts this. Some will say the cubs are confused. Some will say you have tricked them somehow. Some will demand proof that you are worthy of being their guardian. And what do you say? N was silent for a long moment. Her ancient eyes seemed to look through, seeing something beyond the surface. I say that the cubs have chosen, she said finally, and the cubs do not lie. Then she was gone. Sat in the silence that followed. Around her, the cubs began to relax. They had been tense during the elder's visit, she realized. Nervous. But now they settled back into their comfortable positions, pressing against her like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. You knew, said Tu. You knew what you were doing when you chose me. His ears flicked forward. Yes. Why me? I am not even from this world. The small cub considered the question, with the seriousness that seemed to characterize everything she did. When the sickness came, said slowly, we were scared. So scared. The adults could not help us. Our parents could not help us. We thought we were going to die. Her small body pressed closer too. Then you came, you did not know us. We were nothing to you, just strange alien children, but you stayed. You worked through the night without sleep. You touched us gently, you spoke to us softly. You saved us. That was my job, said. I am a doctor. That is what doctors do. No, shook her head firmly. Other doctors would have done the minimum. Other doctors would have followed the rules. Other doctors would not have let me sleep in their bed when I was cold. She looked up with eyes that held wisdom beyond her years. You did not save us because it was your job. You saved us because you cared, because you could not bear to see us suffer, because, even though we were strange and different, you saw us as children who needed help. Did not know what to say to that. That is why we chose you, continued. Not because you are strong or powerful, not because you can protect us from every danger, but because when we were dying you cared enough to try. That is what a Tal is, someone who cares. The other cubs made soft sounds of agreement, felt them press closer, their warmth surrounding her like a living blanket. But 15 years, she said weakly, my entire life, will be with us finished. Is that so bad? Looked around the room at 11 pairs of dark eyes, watching her with hope and trust, and something that looked very much like love. She thought about her empty quarters on the research station, her solitary meals, her long nights spent working because there was nothing else to fill the time. She thought about the careful walls she had built around herself, keeping everyone at a distance, making sure no one ever got close enough to matter. She thought about how those walls had crumbled the moment she felt small body pressing against her for warmth. No, she said finally, it is not so bad. Made a sound that had never heard before. It took her a moment to realize it was laughter, pure, joyful laughter. You will stay, the cub said. It was not a question. I will stay. The cubs erupted into activity. They climbed over each other to reach her, pressing their faces against her hands, her arms, her cheeks. They made clicking sounds and soft growls and that strange laughter. They celebrated in their quiet way. Sat in the middle of the chaos and let herself smile. She did not know what the future held. She did not know what challenges would come. But in that moment, surrounded by warmth and trust and unconditional acceptance, she knew one thing for certain. She had a family now, a strange, alien, unexpected family, but a family nonetheless. And she would protect them with everything she had. Outside her window, the sun was rising over the frozen peaks of. A new day was beginning. A new life was beginning. Watched the light spread across the ice and held her cubs close. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The declaration did not sit well with everyone in. For the first few days after Elder N's announcement, felt eyes on her everywhere she went. The adult watched her with expressions she could not read. Some seemed curious, some seemed angry, some seemed to be waiting for something. She learned what they were waiting for 3 days later. The clan gathering was held in the largest building in the settlement. Every adult was required to attend. Was brought to the center of the room by Diane, who looked nervous in a way she had never seen before. "What is happening?" she whispered. "Trouble," Diane replied. "Just stay calm, do not show fear." Easy for him to say. He was not a small human standing in the middle of 200 large predators who might not want her here. Elder N stood on a raised platform at the front of the room. She raised one arm for silence, and the murmuring crowd went quiet. "We gather to discuss the matter of the Tal Declaration," N announced. "The Cubs have named the human Dr. Park as their chosen guardian. This bond is sacred and cannot be undone." A large male pushed through the crowd. He was bigger than the others, with broad shoulders and deep scars across his face and chest. His fur was dark silver, almost gray, and his eyes burned with barely controlled anger. "Sacred," the male growled. "A human cannot be Tal. It is against nature. It is against tradition. It is an insult to every who has ever lived." The crowd murmured in response. Some agreed, some did not, could not tell which side had more support. "The declaration has been made," N said calmly. "It cannot be changed." "Then I challenge it." The male stepped forward until he was standing directly in front of. He towered over her, his 4 arms crossed over his massive chest. "I am Tal, senior hunter of. I lost my own cub to the sickness. My child died while this human played with medicine she did not understand." Felt the words like a knife to her heart. "I am sorry about your cub. I came as fast as I could. I tried to save everyone." "You failed." Tal's voice was cold. "And now you dare to claim my clan's children as your own. No, I will not allow it." "The declaration cannot be challenged," Elder N said. "It is ancient law." "Laws can be tested." Tal's eyes never left. "I invoke Ken, trial by contest. If the human cannot prove she is worthy to be a guardian, the declaration is void." The crowd went completely silent. Did not need her translation device to understand what was happening. She had read about trials during her studies. Ken was combat, real combat. It was brutal and dangerous and sometimes deadly. A human had never participated in Ken. A human was not supposed to be able to survive it. "The invocation is made," Elder N said. Her voice was heavy with something that sounded like regret. "Does the human accept?" Every eye in the room turned too. She thought about running. She thought about refusing. She thought about all the logical reasons why she should not fight a creature twice her size with 4 arms and claws that could tear through metal. Then she thought about 11 cubs who had chosen her, who trusted her, who believed she would protect them. "I accept," she said. The room erupted in noise, shouted over each other. Some cheered, some howled in anger. Tal smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Foolish human," he said, "I will enjoy killing you." The cubs pressed against his legs. She could feel them shaking. "You will die," whispered Please, there must be another way. Knelt down and gathered the small cub in her arms. If I do not fight, they will take me away from you. They will say our bond is nothing. Is that what you want? His dark eyes filled with tears that were not supposed to be able to cry. No. Then I have to do this. Kiss the top of her furry head. Have faith in me. I am stronger than I look. The trial was set for dawn the next day. That night sat in her quarters and thought about everything she knew about physiology. They were stronger than humans. Much stronger. They were faster too and better adapted to the cold. Their forearms gave them advantages in combat that she could not match. But they were also larger and heavier. Their forearms actually created balance problems if you knew how to exploit them. And they were used to fighting other, not small quick creatures like humans. A knock came at her door. It was Diane carrying a bundle of items. You should not have accepted, he said, pushing past her into the room. Tal has killed in Ken before, 3 times. I did not have a choice. You could have refused, you could have left. And abandoned them, looked at the cubs sleeping in their usual pile on her bed. No, I could not do that. Diane was silent for a moment. Then he began laying out the items he had brought, warming patches to help her move in the cold, a blade sized for human hands, a thick paste that smelled strange but felt warm when she touched it, spiked grips for walking on ice. You are helping me, said. I am protecting the cubs. Diane's fur rippled with complicated emotions. They chose you. I do not understand why, but they did. If you die tomorrow, they will grieve until it breaks them. I have seen enough death. I do not want to see children destroyed by it. He showed her how to use each item. The paste went on her skin to help her stay warm. The warming patches went on her muscles to keep them loose. The grips went on her boots. Tal is strong, Diane said, but he is also proud. He thinks you are weak and stupid. Use that against him. How? Make him chase you, make him angry, make him make mistakes. Diane met her eyes. You cannot beat him in a fair fight, so do not fight fair. The trial began at dawn. The arena was a natural bowl of ice and stone. The clan gathered on the ridges above, watching in silence. Tal stood in the center, bare-chested despite the cold. His scars caught the morning light. Walked out to meet him. She wore everything Diane had given her. The paste on her skin tingled. The warming patches hummed softly. The grips bit into the ice with every step. Begin, Elder N commanded. Tal attacked immediately. He was a blur of silver fur and flashing claws, moving faster than had expected. She threw herself sideways, hit the ice rolling, and came up running. He was fast, but she was smaller, and she had spent weeks watching the cubs play their hunting games. She knew how bodies moved. She led him across the arena, over unstable ice, around sharp rocks, through narrow passages where his size worked against him. Every time he thought he had her, she slipped away. The crowd began to murmur. This was not how Ken was supposed to go. The challenger was supposed to fight, not run. But was not running, she was planning. An hour passed. Both of them were bleeding now. Tal had caught her several times, leaving deep scratches on her arms and legs, but she had hurt him too. Small cuts, strategic wounds, nothing fatal but enough to slow him down. And he was getting angry. Stand and fight, he roared. Face me like a warrior, not a coward. Did not answer. She kept moving, kept dodging, kept making him chase her. Finally, she led him to where she wanted him. A section of the arena where the ice was thin and the rock beneath was sharp and uneven. What is wrong? She called out. Are you tired? I thought we're supposed to be strong. Tal screamed in rage and charged. Waited until the last possible moment. Then she dropped to the ground and rolled sideways. Tal could not stop in time. His massive body hit the thin ice at full speed. It shattered beneath him, and he fell through into a gap between 2 rocks. His right foreleg caught between the stones. She heard the crack of bone breaking. stood over him, breathing hard, covered in blood that was mostly her own. "Yield," she gasped. Tal struggled against the rocks. His leg was trapped. He could not move. His eyes burned with hatred, but the outcome was clear. "I yield," he growled. The arena exploded with howls, surprise, shock, a few sounds that might have been approval. Did not hear them. Her vision was going dark. The cold and the blood loss were finally catching up with her. She fell. She woke in her quarters, was pressed against her chest. The other cubs surrounded her, their warmth keeping her alive. "You lived," said, her voice thick with tears. Smiled weakly. "I lived. You were so brave, so stupid, so wonderful." The small cub pressed her face against his neck. "Please never do that again." "I cannot promise that," said, "but I can promise I will always fight for you, no matter what." Outside, she could hear the adults arguing. The trial had raised more questions than it answered. But in that moment, buried under a pile of warm fur and relief, did not care. She had fought for her cubs. She had won. That was all that mattered. 15 years passed like water through fingers. Learned to read the weather by the color of the sky. She learned to track animals by the marks they left in the snow. She learned to speak the silent language of touch and gesture until the other adults forgot she was human at all. She taught the cubs human songs. She taught them mathematics and science and the names of stars they would probably never visit. She told them stories from Earth about heroes and monsters and ordinary people who did extraordinary things. The cubs grew. Bora, the biggest of them, became a hunter. He was famous across 3 valleys for his skill and his strength. But every time he returned from a hunt, the first thing he did was visit and tell her about his adventures. Became a craftsman. He made beautiful things from ice and stone and metal. His work was displayed in the capital city. But his finest piece, a small statue of a human woman surrounded by cubs, he gave to for her birthday. Became a healer like Diane. She traveled to distant settlements, caring for the sick and injured. But she always came home for the winter festivals, bringing stories and gifts and the latest medical research from across the planet. One by one, the cubs grew up. They found mates. They started families. They built lives of their own in settlements across the frozen world. But they always came home. Elder N passed in the 3rd year. She died peacefully, surrounded by her clan, her last words a blessing for the strange guardian who had become part of against every expectation. Diane became the new elder, and under his guidance, the settlement began to change. Other humans came now, doctors and scientists and teachers, invited by a clan that had once wanted nothing to do with outsiders. They were welcomed carefully, cautiously, but they were welcomed. Tal never fully accepted. The hatred in his eyes had cooled over the years, becoming something closer to grudging respect. When his second litter was born, he allowed to examine them. He did not thank her when she found and treated a minor illness that might have become serious. But he nodded to her when they passed in the settlement, and for Tal, that was practically friendship. Aged differently than the around her. Human years were shorter, their bodies more fragile. By the time 15 years had passed, silver had crept into her black hair. Lines had formed around her eyes. Her joints ached in the cold in ways they never had before. But she was happy, happier than she had ever been on the research station, happier than she had ever been anywhere. Was the last to leave. She had grown tall and strong, her black markings now distinctive rather than shameful. The other looked at her with respect now, not scorn. She had been chosen for the Planetary Council, the first of children to hold such an honor. On the day of her departure, she stood at its door and waited. "You could come with me," said, "to the capital. There is work for humans there now, important work. You could help shape the future of our planet." Looked out at the valley she had come to love, the frozen peaks, the stone buildings, the endless white sky that had once seemed cold and hostile and now felt like home. "This is my home," she said. "This is where I belong." Sfur rippled with understanding. She stepped forward and pressed her forehead against. It was a gesture reserved for pack mates and beloved ones, the highest honor it could give. "You saved us," said. "All of us. Not just from the sickness, but from ourselves. We were so afraid of different. We thought that anything strange must be dangerous. We almost lost the best thing that ever happened to this clan because of that fear." Felt tears on her cheeks, human tears. She had stopped being embarrassed by them years ago. "I did not do anything special," she said. "I just stayed." "Yes," his dark eyes gleamed with moisture of their own. "That is what humans do. You stay. When things are hard, you stay. When things are frightening, you stay. When everyone else would give up and leave, you stay." She pressed closer, her forehead warm against. "It is perhaps your most wonderful quality," whispered, "and perhaps your most irritating." Laughed through her tears. Elder N said something similar once. She called it a weakness. She was wrong, pulled back slightly, her eyes meetings. "It is your greatest strength. It is what makes humans special. It is why the Cubs chose you all those years ago." "Because I stayed. Because you could not do anything else. Because caring for others is so deeply part of your nature that you could not walk away even when it would have been easier, even when it would have been smarter." Smiled, showing just a hint of teeth. "Even when a bunch of alien children claimed you without asking permission." She left for the capital that afternoon. Watched the transport climb into the sky until it disappeared into the clouds. Then she turned and walked back into the settlement. A new generation of Cubs was playing in the central square, the of her original 11 plus others from across the settlement. They had grown up with stories about the human guardian. To them, was not strange or different. She was simply part of family. One of the Cubs detached from the group and ran toward her. She was small, with unusual white patches on her silver fur. The other Cubs sometimes treated her differently because of those markings, but had made sure she knew she was loved. "Tal," the Cub called, using the ancient word that had become synonymous with herself. "Will you tell us a story?" Smiled and knelt in the snow. More Cubs gathered around her, their warm bodies pressing close. Their dark eyes watched her with trust and love, and the same patient attention she remembered from 15 years ago. "What kind of story do you want to hear?" she asked. "A story about humans," another Cub said, "about how brave they are." "A story about Earth," said a third, "about the blue planet." The smallest Cub pressed against side. "A story about a human who saved a bunch of sick Cubs," she said quietly, "and about how those Cubs chose her to be their guardian forever." Gathered the small Cub into her arms. The others pressed closer, forming a circle of warmth and trust. "That is my favorite story too," she said. And there, in the frozen valley between two ancient mountains, surrounded by children who were not her blood, but were absolutely her family, began to speak. She told them about a human doctor who thought she was alone in the universe. She told them about 11 sick Cubs who taught her what love really meant. She told them about traditions and challenges and battles fought not with strength, but with determination. She told them about staying, about caring, about the strange and wonderful power of simply refusing to give up on the people who needed you. The sun set over. The stars came out, cold and bright and beautiful. The Cubs listened with wide eyes as their guardian wove words into magic. And somewhere far away, on a transport flying toward the capital, looked out the window at the frozen world below and smiled. The human had saved them. And they had saved her right back. That was how it worked. That was how it had always worked. Across every planet in every species, the truth was the same. Love was not about blood or tradition or making sense. Love was about choosing someone and being chosen in return. It was about staying when leaving would be easier. It was about fighting for those who could not fight for themselves. It was about 11 cubs and one human woman, and a bond that nothing could break. This was the story of Dr. Park. This was the story of. This was the story of how humanity proved, once again, that their greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers. It was simply this: when something small and helpless looked up at them and asked for protection, humans could not look away, even when it cost them everything. Especially then,